my name is Nadya Tan, and this is Spotlight. Thank you for joining us on our very first episode. I'd like to introduce a man who just recently joined the SJII family. He grew up in Dublin, was the headmaster of various schools in the UK from 1997 to 2011, and up until most recently, he was the headmaster of the prep school of Marlborough College, Malaysia. Welcome, Mr Tig Mooney, principal of SJII ES.
Thank you, Nadia. Good
Thanks
to be here.
for joining us. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your background, where you grew up?
I was born in Dublin and I grew up in Dublin. I went to university in Dublin, and in 1990 I left to go to the wild country of Scotland. And I was in Scotland from 1990 to 1997. And in Scotland I met my wife, and we got married. And then we went down to Dorset, where I was the headmaster of a boarding school. And then we loved Scotland so much, we went back to Scotland. We lived in Glasgow, where my 3 children were born. So they're very proud Scottish people. And then went back to England, where we were for 8 years, and then came over to Malaysia. And my wife and my 2 younger children are still at Marlborough, and I'm here, and we do a commute.
So how is it like? Do they plan on coming over here as well, or?
I don't know. I mean, that's a very good question. My daughter is doing her IB at Marlborough, and I think she'll probably finish out her IB there. My youngest son, Lorcan, he might come over.
Oh.
It really depends on how he feels, how his IGCSEs go. I think he's quite attracted to coming over here because just down the road in Novena there are about 15 climbing shops, which he wants to live in, I think. He's a very keen climber.
That's nice. So what are your fondest high school memories?
Oh, my memories?
Yeah.
Oh, heavens. I wasn't a very good student, I have to be very honest with you, and I didn't do very well in school, so I suppose most of my memories are getting into trouble, actually. And then I didn't do very well in my, I suppose, the equivalent of the IB.
Oh, okay.
And realised very quickly that I'd made a terrible mistake and was given an opportunity to go back and did another year. So I did a 7th year, if you can imagine,
okay.
And managed to do as much as I needed to do to get into university from that point. And at that point, I decided I needed a teacher who had taken a little bit more interest in me to make a difference. So I thought, I'm going to be one of those teachers.
Oh, that's so nice.
That's where it came from, yeah.
So could you describe your teaching experience and why exactly you decided to become a principal?
I was a history teacher, a secondary school history teacher, an English teacher. And I ended up in a prep school in Scotland. I found myself teaching a whole range of subjects. And then in Scotland, you have to register with the Scottish teachers registration sort of organisation. And I went through a long process with them, and they registered me as a primary school teacher and as a secondary school history teacher. I spent 7 years doing that, and I was very lucky. I was promoted in the prep school I was to, I suppose, what we call deputy head academic. And I went on a number of courses, and I suddenly began to think, I could actually maybe have a go at running a school. So in 1997, I just applied for pretty much every headship that was going, and had a interesting experience going to different schools, and was appointed to a boarding school in Dorset. So that was it. I sort of fell into it more than anything else.
So you've been a headmaster for about 20 years now. Is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Does it ever get boring?
Nope.
Or?
Nope. Every day is amazing.
Oh, that's really nice.
I look. So this term has been quite difficult so far because you're starting off in a new school. But actually, if I look back over the last 8 weeks, 10 weeks, every single minute has been amazing.
Oh, that's nice. So, what are your first impressions of SJII, and how does it differ from Marlborough?
Well, it's completely different from Marlborough. I mean, and I suppose because Marlborough runs like a boarding school, even though in the senior school in Marlborough, over half the children board. In the prep school, less than 50 board. But it runs like a boarding school, and the whole ethos, even though the majority of the prep school children are day children, it runs like a boarding school. So that's a massive difference. The only thing that stops the prep school in Marlborough being a genuinely a complete boarding school is that they don't have school on Saturday for the prep school children. The high school children do, the senior school children do. So that is a huge difference just straight away. To compare the elementary school here with the prep school, there's also differences in the curriculum. and in the character education. And I think in the approach that the teachers take. And I'm not saying that neither is better. The other big difference is that the elementary school does IPC and it does Singapore Maths, so it's quite different from a curriculum in comparison to the prep school in Marlborough. So two very different schools, and they run very differently as well.
So how do you intend to put your own stamp on the elementary school?
Well, it was very interesting. It's changed already because, of course, one of the reasons why I think the governors looked to appoint me is that it was that we were going to be moving by 2022.
Oh, yeah.
Now that looks, it's not definite yet, but that looks like it's going to be 2025 now. So one of the main jobs that I saw myself doing was guiding the school through a huge change, moving from this site to a new site, and having been involved in Marlborough setting up, and then 3 years ago building a whole new prep school. I have a lot of skills in that area. So, but of course, now we think we're going to be here till 2025. That gives us more time, which is good. So I can start planning that better, because coming over here, if we had to have moved to 2022, it's really tight time-wise. I mean, we're already behind, if you see what I'm saying. So what I see now is I see myself working very hard to make sure, if it's confirmed that we're here till 2025, making sure that the elementary school site is absolutely tip-top and developed the way it should be for the number of children in it and for the subjects that we do. So there has to be development on site. So that needs to happen very quickly to allow us to function the way we should do between, say, 2020 and 2025. So my thoughts are kind of thinking more along those lines. That's more to do with the physical plant of the school. I want to learn from the teachers here. I want to what gets done really well here is professional development of the teachers, and I want to really push that forward. I also want to really concentrate on the Virtues program, that the project that the children get involved in here, which is an amazing character education. And I think we need to really push that forward as well. I think also I was very lucky when I came first. I questioned the teachers as to what they felt were the things that they were worried about, really, and what was good and what was not so good. And one of the things that came out was that it's a very, very busy school, extremely busy school, and has a very cluttered calendar. And I want to try and slightly unpick that a little bit. Not lose the initiatives that have been put in place, and there are things I want to put in place as well, but make it slightly more manageable. So they're my first impressions and what I'm thinking about as we go forward.
So where do you see the school, like 5 years from now? What's your vision?
Well, 5 years from now, what's that? That's going to be 2023. We will be in the middle of getting ready to move. So what I see is a school that has, for example, a calendar that's set a year in advance, so that we're not making the mistake of, say, running 3 or 4 things on at the same time, and then also at the same time in the high school. And that's one thing I do also see, and one of the things that the governors have intimated, that they want to see a closer cooperation between the high school and the elementary school. And we've already started to introduce that with coming up this January. We're going to have joint PD. We're going to have the new teachers from both schools coming together. And I'm working very closely with the high school principal. And the vice principals are also working closely together as well. So nice. I can see there's going to be more cooperation between the two schools, and it'll be very obvious by 2023 that it'll have more of an all-through feel to it. And that'll have some people will be happy about it, and some people won't be happy about it. But that's the direction we're going to go.
Okay. So just now you mentioned that members of staff feel that the ES is a very busy school, and that's something that you might want to look into changing. So I was wondering, where exactly does the balance lie? Because on one hand, you want an environment that's busy enough to sort of represent how the high school is going to be like, but on the other hand, you want students to have time to be kids and for staff to just have fun with their students. So
I think the trick is to find a balance, Nadia. I think the problem can be that, our teachers are really passionate and really enthusiastic, and our kids, our students are really passionate and enthusiastic about being here. The problem is when you have a number of things that run into each other. So there are certain times in a school term where people are getting a little bit tired, children are a little bit tired. So for example, this week just gone and next week coming, we're all a bit tired. We've had 10 weeks of term without a break, really. And what tends to happen, and not just this school, but what tends to happen is that events begin to run into each other, and that's the problem. I'm not saying we shouldn't have those events, I'm just saying that we should spread them out and make sure that they're at appropriate times within, and that just takes planning. And sometimes it takes it takes a conversation where you say, okay, that's a great event, we shouldn't have it here, we should have it at a different time, and maybe even in the year. And possibly even say, do you know what, maybe that's not the best event to actually have.
So does busyness just simply come from the clashing of events, or does, for example, students' workloads or the amount of extracurricular students do?
I think it's busy is good. I'm not saying busy isn't good. I'm just saying that sometimes busy tumbles over into a non-manageable situation where you might have 3 or 4 events running at the same time. And it's not just for the students and for the staff. It's also for the parents. We had we got it slightly wrong at the start of this term, where we had parent-teacher conferences and we had sports days on the same week. So we had a number of parents coming in a number of days a week. And you've got to remember, I think the latest statistics are that about 70-something% of our parents, international parents in Singapore, are both working now. So it's not just looking at what's happening in the school with the children and with the staff. It's also looking at what's happening with people coming in to attend the events. So it's just striking a balance. And I think through nobody's fault, the balance has maybe been a little bit weighted towards busyness, tipping over into sort of really difficult choices for people to make.
So with the increase in planning, like how long is that going to take before people see?
Well, it's interesting. We had a meeting with the EPSG and a couple of governors just this week, and the report that the EPSG parents put to the governors was a number of issues that they wanted to raise, which were all very valid. And 2 of the points they did make were that actually they had already seen that communication was slightly better than it had been in the past, and they also felt that we'd already begun to work on the calendar to make it slightly more. Not less busy, but more balanced. And that will just continue. So, for example, we've already made a commitment to the whole community that we will have the calendar for next term ready in as much as it can be by November, the end of November, this November coming. Having said that, certain things are really difficult to timetable. So, for example, Access Leagues, the sports, they meet to decide on the season 2 weeks before the fixtures start. So you can't actually put those into a calendar. But what we can do is you can put all the things that are definite into a calendar. And of course the ultimate aim would be to actually emulate the high school in a sense. And I know that their cycle is that they'll have their must-haves for the calendar already completed by July before the next year. If you're with me.
Yeah.
So what we need to get to a situation where we're matching that and we're communicating with them to make sure there's no clashes with the ish and with the hall and with the glass hall and with all the facilities that we have on site. And that just needs a lot of communication, and that's going to be part of the 2 schools coming together a bit better.
Oh, that's nice. That actually leads on nicely to what I want to talk about next, which is about the relationship between the ES and the HS. So I noticed that I've been in the high school for, I think 5 years now, and I've never really seen an ES teacher, never really been here apart from this project. So I was wondering how you vision that sort of relationship looking like moving forward?
Well, it's at the moment, it's at the sort of the formative stages of what we're trying to do. So I've had a number of conversations with the principal of the high school. And one of the things which will start people like yourself seeing more of the elementary school teachers is that next in January, when the new teachers who are starting in the high school and new teachers who are starting in the elementary school come in for their induction, we're going to put them together as much as possible. Nice. And I've certainly learned that when you start a group of teachers together in a new job, they kind of consider themselves the recruits of 2018, and they bond together both in terms of the school and also outside of school. And when you have that running through a whole staff rooms between high school and elementary school, you immediately have a closer bond anyway because they're communicating all the time. So that's just one example of where that will help. The ESTV is a good example as well, in the sense that we're doing this, which is a fantastic new departure where something from the elementary school is now moving up into the high school, which I think is the way it should be. And equally, if something as amazing is happening in the high school, that should be able to sort of flow downwards into the elementary school. I think one of the obvious ways where we're trying to look at really close cooperation is when the transition between elementary school and high school. And the stats speak for themselves. I think I maybe get these wrong, but it's around about all but 2 of our top grade of grade 6 went into the high school this year, and we're expecting the same next year and the following year. I think at the moment there's 2 or 3 who aren't, but essentially all of our elementary students will move on to the high school. And so what you'll have very, very quickly is you'll have a huge number of children who are based in the high school, who've been through the elementary school, and that immediately you get a kind of a cross-fertilization of all the things that they've experienced here, being there.
So, with that kept in mind, would the primary sort of branding of the ES moving forward be sort of like a foundation high school or a pre-high school, or is there?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think. Because of course the opposite of all of what I just said is people will sort of say, oh, hang on, the elementary school is disappearing and it's not a separate school like it used to be, and there's always a danger of that. But I think if you look at our calendar, for example, we've kept a slightly longer summer holiday and a slightly shorter Christmas holiday in comparison to the high school. So the independence will always be there, and the most important thing to bear in mind is that my line manager is not the principal of the high school. I answer directly to the Board of Governors. So there's always that inbuilt independence within the school. And also you have to remember that the elementary school is a CPE school, and the CPE is the government organisation that basically legislates for all the international schools in Singapore.
Okay.
Whereas the high school is an MOE school. Okay. So 2 different licenses. Okay. So there's always that separation between the 2 schools, and if you look at the makeup of the children, I may get my statistics wrong here, but the high school has to be at least 51% Singaporean, whereas we tend to be PR and sort of international work permit people and dependent pass people. So there is always a difference in the makeup of the 2 schools in terms of the pupils that are there.
Okay, so because of the difference in the makeup, how much were the interests of the ES kids particularly taken into account when the calendar was changed to match more to be more like the high school calendar?
Well, that's a really good question, actually. Were the children consulted? Probably not, actually. I think that was taken more from the point of view of at the top level in 2016, the governors asked the principals to send a questionnaire out to the parents, and they got a very clear mandate from the parents to look at lengthening or making the summer 6 weeks and the Christmas holiday 4 weeks. Again, the statistics are interesting. We're looking at holidays. I think it was about 70% of the parents in the ES wanted that longer summer break. So there was consultation at a fairly reasonable level with the parents. More recently, a change that has happened is for the 2019 autumn half term, the one that we're heading towards now. Yeah. You have 2 1-week breaks, and we have 2. So we have 2 weeks as one break, and the decision was made back in, I'm going to say, possibly February, to match match the schools up again, and there probably was not a lot. I think there could have been a little bit more consultation with both the parents in the ES and indeed the staff in the ES, but the decision was made and it's happened now. When I saw the calendar for 2019, I did actually like the idea of 2 separate weeks because, for example, we're now hitting our 10th week without a break. Yeah. And statistically, I know that my vice principal pastoral has dealt with, I think it was 23% more pastoral issues this month in comparison to last month. And our absenteeism amongst the children is up by 15% on last month. Wow. So the children are tired, the staff are tired, and if you look at how it's broken up, and again, I might get my figures exactly right. It's about we start in August, and then there's 7 weeks, then there's a break, then there's 6 weeks, then there's a break, and then there's 5 weeks, and then there's Christmas. Now, from my point of view, I think that's educationally very sound. Some people might argue, but you know, the children are starting and stopping and starting and stopping. I would argue that once they get into the swing of school, it doesn't matter if there's a week break, because when they come back, we have the teachers here that are skilled enough to get them back on task and going again. But as the governors have said, we'll never please everybody.
Yeah,
there's always going to be one group of parents who are saying, actually, I want to be completely international, and there'll be another group of parents who will say, do you know what? I want us to be more local, more Singaporean. There is another thing that's happening. It's happening across Singapore, which I think is relevant to all this. It's anecdotal, but there's a little bit of evidence if you look at the figures. There has been in the last sort of 3 to 5 years a decline in the number of Western expats in Singapore and in Hong Kong and in Kuala Lumpur and in a lot of the Asian big cities. And a corresponding increase in Asian expats. So if you look at the number of parents coming to look around the school here in the elementary school, it's noticeable. There are a lot more Japanese, there are a lot more Korean, there are a lot more mainland Chinese, a lot more Indian, and noticeably less English, Australian, American. So there is a change, and I saw that happening as well in Marlborough College over the last 2 years. And when I go to meet other principals and heads, they echo that sentiment. So there is a sort of a change happening anyway, which I think will lend itself to holidays being more Asian based, if I can put it that way, rather than the traditional, say, British holiday of a big summer holiday and everything else being slightly smaller.
So what about the parents who have kids who are both in the elementary school and maybe another kid who's in a more traditional, like, British school that follows the British calendar?
Yeah, that's a difficulty, because you know, if you look at it, our holidays have moved away, say, from, say, Tanglin. Although you'll find that every school has peculiarities. I think I would say that if you look at the 6-week break in the summer, that does give families, there's quite a lot of rollover, or there's matching time. So if I look at my family, we break up on the 14th of June, and my family break up, I think, on the 1st of July. So there's a crossover of about 4 weeks where we can be sort of on holiday together.
That's great.
So it can work. It's just slightly more difficult.
So the final thing I'd like to discuss is this issue about homework. So we noticed that in the US, there's been a movement away from homework. I was wondering if that's something that will ever proliferate in the ES, or?
I always remember a headmaster I knew who went to be head of a school in Scotland. I'm trying to remember the name of the school now. It's in Edinburgh, a prep school, and he hit the front page of Scotland on Sunday, which is the broadsheet that's published every Sunday in Scotland, because he banned homework.
Wow.
And there was a big furore about it. And you know, that can work. I personally think I think we call it home learning in the ES, works as long as it's sensible. And I think the most important thing is to make sure that it really is reinforcing what's been learned in school during the day and during the week. And I think also for elementary school age children, you know, it's a good habit to get into, to do your 10 minutes reading, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I think should just become part of what you do. And don't forget, by the time, well, you probably know, when you get to IB, there is a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and my son's just finished his IB. And I'm not joking you, he was working harder than I worked in Marlborough, quite literally. And you have to prepare for that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, you know, a 4-year-old should be preparing for IB, but what I'm saying is that you just gradually, very gently start building it up, so that when they do get to doing their IB, they're not going to be completely destroyed by the sheer volume of work they have to do, because, make no mistake, it's a really hard course.
Yeah.
If you work, you can do it. If you don't work, you can't do it. And if you haven't got that work ethic by the time you get there, it's going to be really tough. So I don't ever see it disappearing. I just think it needs to be sensible.
So with that kept in mind, how would you ensure that students strike a good balance between, you know, working and still having the time to play or do extracurriculars?
Well, that's interesting. It's a really good question as well, Nadya. I think we just had an outside trainer come and talking to us about sort of online stuff with children, and some of the statistics about children in front of devices is crazy. And I think that's something I'd be more concerned about rather than an hour over a week doing 10 minutes reading or whatever it is. I'm more concerned about that balance than I would be about a little bit of homework and a little bit of spelling and a little bit of Singapore maths. That I think that is far more dangerous to the development of children. Well, not just children, but all of us. We were talking earlier on about Netflix binges,
Yeah.
And that's sort of a grown-up example. But the problem is, if you're a young child and you're being formed as a human being, as a youngster, and you're spending 4 or 5 hours in front of a screen, that's not good. As opposed to maybe spending an hour, depending on your age, across a week on some homework.
So talking about Singapore math, I was wondering, do you know why exactly the elementary school decides to use Singapore math?
Well, I think that's I think I do. My impression is that when the elementary school was being set up, I think it was seen as an opportunity to have a school that had some points of difference from your traditional international school, your Tanglins, your Dulwiches, your Marlboroughs, who default to English national curriculum, or if it's the American school, I presume an American program. So they looked at doing things slightly differently. And the 3 things I think they picked that are really quite interesting are Singapore Maths, because Singapore Maths is famous across the whole world.
Okay.
They picked the Virtues Project, because it's an amazing character development program. And while it might seem now to be totally normal, 10 years ago, having compulsory Chinese every day was unusual. So those are the 3 things as a sort of slightly different from the norm. And then you add into the mix the sort of the Catholic ethos, the Lasallian values. That's the answer in a sense. I haven't been able to read through any particular philosophical or was there any other reason for that? But I think it was to try and do something in a slightly different way.
That's really interesting, because I was thinking if we're trying to foster more collaboration and build the ES in a way that really caters for high school education later on, we're actually banned from doing Singapore math, like the modeling method in all our math classes. I was wondering if that's something that probably needs changing.
Possibly. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we haven't looked at maths at all yet. I've looked at Chinese, and we're going to look at Chinese a bit more closely. And I know that Pui Ling, who's our head of Chinese here, we're doing a review of that to look at trying to pull it a little bit closer to enable our students as they go from here into the high school to maybe start at a slightly higher level in Chinese without losing the children who are never going to be able to speak fluent Mandarin. But to be honest, I haven't looked at the Singapore maths yet. But that's an interesting point.
All right, so now I have sort of a list of questions that students have sent in that they would like to know about the new principal. So first up, are you an Apple user or an Android user?
I'm an Apple and an Android user.
Oh.
So my school phone is an Apple, and my own phone is a BlackBerry, which is Android.
Okay. What's your favorite sport?
Rugby.
Okay. This is a weird one. What's your shoe size?
9.5. 9.5 on this foot. Nearer 10 on this foot.
What?
I think I must be slightly abnormal.
Wow. What's your favorite food?
Ooh, everything. I just love food. If you ask anybody, even after 8 weeks, everybody says, "Oh, he likes his food." I suppose I like Asian food. I like Indian food.
So how are you finding Singaporean food?
Oh, is that like in comparison to Malaysian food?
Yeah, like our hawker centers and.
Slightly more expensive, and I don't worry about if it's going to sound terrible. In Singapore, I think perhaps there's tighter controls over the centres. Although having said that, I've never been ill in Malaysia at all. But I just love everything.
That's great.
I've tried bak kut teh quite a few times
Yeah.
since I've come here, which I haven't really had an opportunity to try in Malaysia. What else have I had? I tried
Chili crab.
No, I haven't tried chili crab because do you know what? I hate getting my fingers and hands all sticky and gooey.
But that's the best part.
I know, I hate that. I can't cope with that. So I don't do that. I'm not very good at that. Or I get somebody to do it for me. And I always when I get prawns, I always say European style, which means peeled. Yeah. They never do it, but I try. I tried something else here recently, which I expected it to be really nice, but it turned out to be really sweet, which was the it's a radish cake or
Oh.
radish cake. But I got the black one thinking
Yeah,
that
yeah,
would be
yeah.
the spicy one, but it was a sweet one and I was really disappointed. So I got to try the white one.
Yeah, definitely.
So we keep on talking about food. Go on.
How fast can you type?
Oh, blimey. How fast? Slowly.
Oh, okay.
It's a two-finger job, I'm afraid.
Okay.
And I make lots of mistakes. And the other thing I also do, I've noticed that if I'm typing and I'm thinking about what I'm writing, I leave words out all the time. And then I read back over and I go, I'm after leaving a word out. I thought I've written it or typed it, but I do that all the time.
I think we have to get Mr. Rayner to give you a
I
typing
need
course.
Mavis Beacon teaches typing.
What's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Oh, blimey. That's a good one. I don't have a favourite one as such. There's a whole pile of them that sort of spring to mind. I love all the Francis Ford Coppola ones. One of his early ones, Rumblefish. Don't know, that's quite a good one. You know, as a youngster growing up, Apocalypse Now was a favourite. What else? I'm trying to think. Go on, blimey. I love I'm a real big fan of science fiction, so any of the science fiction movies, Star Wars and all that.
Okay.
I'm big into those, yeah.
How many languages can you speak?
I can just about speak English. I'm still learning.
Okay.
A little bit of Irish.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite subject?
History.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mooney, for taking some time to talk to us today. We would like to wish you all the best for your years ahead in the ES, and we'll see you on the next Spotlight.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you.